Paris, 1903. The new century had brought the city electricity, motor cars, and airplanes on the horizon, but the old shadows clung stubbornly to its narrow streets. By day, Paris shone with cafés, theaters, and the bustle of students and workers rushing across bridges. But when the lamps sputtered and the fog rolled in from the Seine, the city changed. Doors closed early, shutters banged tight, and certain alleys whispered of things better left unseen. In those shadowy alleys, the tale of the blind man quietly began, though nobody had a clue about it yet. The house at 27 Rue de l'Arbalete had been sitting empty for so long that most folks had completely forgotten about its last owner. Seriously, the shutters were so rotted they looked like they might fall off any second, and the roof sagged like it was tired of holding itself up. Weeds had taken over, clawing their way through the cobblestones, making it look like nature was reclaiming its territory. Kids would dare each other to touch the door, claiming that if you stood super still, you could hear a faint tapping from inside. Neighbors swore the house sighed in winter, with the boards creaking as if someone was tiptoeing around at night. For decades, the police brushed off these eerie tales. But come February of that year, they stumbled upon something inside that they just couldn't ignore. What a twist, right? A seamstress named Juliette Morin left her workshop at dusk, humming a tune as she crossed the Latin Quarter. She was last seen turning down Rue de l'Arbalete. 3 nights later, a lamplighter noticed the door to number 27 ajar, though it had been locked for years. Inside, in the cellar, Juliette sat in a wooden chair, her hands folded as if in prayer. At first, the lamplighter thought she was alive until his torch showed her skin waxy with death. Her face was powdered white, her hair brushed as if by loving hands. But her eyes were sewn shut with thick black thread, the stitches clumsy and cruel. Behind her on the wall was a phrase scrawled in chalk, each letter tall and deliberate. Asterisk nous voyons mieux dans le noir. Asterisk we see better in the dark. The discovery gripped Paris. The newspapers splashed lurid headlines about a killer who posed his victims as though they were dolls. They called him asterisk l'homme aveugle asterisk the blind man of Rue de l'Arbalete. Panic swept the quarter, women hurried home before dusk, students walked in groups, and rumors bloomed. Some claimed the house had always been cursed, that its former master, Dr. Antoine Vellier, had dabbled in medicine too dark to be called science. Vellier had once been a surgeon of note, famed for his work on blindness, but his methods had grown monstrous. There were whispers of grafts, of experiments with nerves and eyes. Patients disappeared. In 1897, after the death of a child during one of his operations, Vellier had been forced to close his practice. He left Paris under a cloud of disgrace, and his townhouse fell to ruin. No one knew where he went, or if he still lived. But as the newspapers feasted on the details of Juliette's death, his name returned like a shadow. The police assigned Inspector Lucie Armand to the case. Armand was in his 30s, a lean man with a sharp mustache and sharper eyes. He had no patience for superstition. He believed every ghost had a human hand behind it, every curse a motive. But even he felt something unsettled in that cellar. He studied the chalk letters, the careful folding of the victim's hands, the powder on her face. Whoever had done this did not see themselves as a killer, but as an artist arranging a work. A week later, another body appeared. A young violinist, Camille Bresson, vanished after leaving her music lesson. She was found in the same cellar, seated with her violin placed gently across her knees. Her eyes, too, were stitched closed. Again, the words were on the wall. But this time, the chalk was fresher, almost smudged, as though the killer had been disturbed and left in haste. Fear gripped the Latin Quarter. Every missing person became a potential victim of the blind man. Parents pulled their children from art schools, and the cafes that once pulsed with debate fell into hushed silence. The press only made it worse, publishing illustrations of the victims with grotesque stitches. speculating whether the blind man sewed the eyes to keep them from seeing what he had done or whether he believed he was granting them some kind of twisted gift. Armand threw himself into the investigation. He spoke to neighbors, to shopkeepers, to anyone who might have seen movement around Rue de l'Arbalete. One baker's boy claimed he had glimpsed a tall man limping down the street at night, carrying something heavy over his shoulder. Another swore he saw a figure with smoked glasses peering from the cellar window. A washerwoman said she heard music drifting from the house, a warped violin tune that stopped the moment she approached. The inspector followed every lead, but the killer always seemed a step ahead. By March, two more victims had appeared, a painter and a poet, both young, both hopeful, both found seated in the same cellar, eyes sewn, bodies arranged as if on display. Each time, the phrase on the wall grew bolder. Asterisk nous voyons miedans lenoir. Asterisk the blind man's gallery was growing. Armand began to haunt the Latin Quarter himself, sitting in smoky cafes, watching the students and dreamers. One night, he saw him. A tall figure moved among the tables, his coat long and worn, his right leg dragging slightly as he walked. His face was hidden behind thick smoked spectacles, his jaw sharp beneath the shadows of the lamp. He did not speak. He only paused at tables, listening to laughter, tilting his head toward the voices of the young. Then, as if satisfied, he slipped away into the mist. Armand followed, his heart pounding. The figure turned down Rue de l'Arbalete and entered the townhouse without hesitation. But when Armand brought his men the next day, the house was empty. No figure, no evidence, only the victims' chairs and the fading chalk. Yet in a drawer, the inspector found something chilling, a ledger filled with names. Some were crossed out, others were underlined. Every victim was listed, and at the very bottom, in ink that was still wet, was his own name, Lucien Armand. From that moment, the inspector felt the noose tighten. He doubled his guard, but paranoia seeped into his bones. He felt eyes on him in the street, footsteps behind him in alleys. At night, he dreamed of stitched faces turning toward him, mouths opening in silent screams. Still, he pressed on. He questioned pawnbrokers, cabmen, anyone who might have encountered the man. At last, a break came. A violin matching Camille's was found in a pawn shop in Montparnasse. The broker described a man with a limp and smoked glasses who had sold it. Above the shop, Armand discovered an attic room rented in cash. The door was locked, but once forced open, the inspector nearly retched. The room was lined with shelves of jars, each filled with cloudy fluid. Inside floated eyes, dozens of them, preserved like specimens. On the walls hung diagrams of the human eye, detailed sketches, surgical notes scrawled in a hand both elegant and unhinged. A small gramophone spun endlessly in the corner, playing a warped waltz, but the tenant was gone. Only the faint creak of the stairs betrayed that someone had fled moments before they entered. The fire erupted just 2 nights later, turning the attic room into a blazing inferno. It devoured everything those precious jars filled with memories, the delicate sketches that captured fleeting moments, and even the old gramophone that once played sweet melodies. In an instant, it all turned to smoke, leaving nothing but ash behind. The killer had covered his tracks flawlessly. The police were desperate, scrambling to pin it on local criminals or anarchists, anyone but the elusive man they couldn't seem to catch. But the neighborhood, oh, they knew better. They whispered in hushed tones, sharing tales of the blind man still lurking in the shadows, always watching, always waiting for the next moment to strike. It felt like a ghost story, one that kept everyone on edge, wondering who would be next. The killings stopped, but the fear never left. Students swore they saw him at the edge of crowds, listening, tilting his head. Lovers claimed to hear the sound of scissors snipping in the dark. And on Rue de l'Arbalete, neighbors still reported noises in the house scratching, dragging, the faint strains of a violin. The cellar window, long bricked up, sometimes seemed to breathe with light on moonless nights. Inspector Armand grew older, but the case haunted him relentlessly until his very last breath. He never caught the elusive blind man, that shadowy figure who slipped through his fingers time and time again. The mystery of the ledger with his own name remained unsolved, leaving Armand frustrated. Did Dr. Vellier really return, or was it just a figment of his imagination? Maybe some disciple continued his work in the shadows, carrying on a twisted legacy. All he left behind were notes filled with questions that spiraled in his mind, sketches of stitches that seemed to dance across the pages, and a single phrase he underlined over and over. Asterisk nous voyons miedans lenoir. Asterisk, it's like he believed that understanding could only come from the darkness, that maybe the answers he sought were hidden in the very shadows he feared. What a haunting thought, right? To this day, in the Latin Quarter, people say if you linger too long in front of number 27, you may hear a violin drifting from the cellar, soft and broken. And if you do, you must never turn toward it, for the blind man does not like to be seen, he prefers to do the seeing himself.